I'm saying that Srila Prabhupada brought the Hare Krishna movement to the West, to America, in 1965. And he made it clear it was a cultural movement and an educational institution he was establishing when he created ISKCON. They were to be a delivery system for the culture, the Vedic culture, the Sanatana Dharma that Srila Prabhupada was bringing with him, and they were to form an educational institution to educate the people in general as to the purpose of the movement.
Is that why you went to Buffalo?
Exactly. After I was initiated October 66, and after about a year, I was working. I wasn't hanging around the temple, I was working. I was the first family man in the movement. I had a wife and a 2-year-old son, and I was working. And I decided that after about a year of being initiated, that I had to reciprocate with Srila Prabhupada. And I was thinking like that when this opportunity came up to go to Buffalo. And I took it. And with Srila Prabhupada's permission, I quit my job and I went to Buffalo. But I understood that college students were an up step from the streets of the East Village. The college preaching really moved our movement into another dimension. Because these people, these students were going to school for an education. They were concentrating on their livelihood, their future, and they were committed to being responsible, at least that much. And we needed that kind of manpower.
You're saying you were the first householder in ISKCON?
No, I wasn't the first householder. Srila Prabhupada initiated Mukunda and I forget her name.
Janaki.
Janaki,
Yeah, he said, now you must be married. So they were married and they joined before I did. But when I joined, I had a son. That's called a family, a wife and a son. So I was the first family to join.
Okay, nice.
It's no big deal, but I mean, that's what it was. I had a job, I was responsible. I was trying to take care of a family.
Now, how did you first meet Prabhupada or the devotees? Did you see them doing a Hari Nam? Did you walk by 26 Second Avenue? What was your first contact?
So look, are we doing the video now that we're supposed to?
That's the thing, Gaura.
I'm just doing one for me. I'm just
look, the whole question is, are we doing this for you? Or are we doing this for a lot of devotees that you think want to know the same thing? If we're doing it for you, I'm going to stop.
No, we're doing it for everybody.
Yes, so therefore I'll save it.
Okay.
Good.
I can tell it a million times, but I don't often. But I'm not going to answer that question now because it'll be
okay.
Thank you, Prabhu, for understanding that. That's amazing what you just said. I appreciate that.
I mean, my problem is that whatever, just like that essay I wrote, I sent you that essay. That essay was entitled "A Look at the Big Picture of the World Today."
Yeah.
I wrote that for devotees to understand what the heck's going on. We have to understand things from Srila Prabhupada's perspective. But I'm not going to answer that question now because it'll be
okay.
Thank you, Prabhu, for understanding that. That's amazing what you just said.
So Srila Prabhupada said once, he said, we must see things from Krishna's. My problem is that whatever, just like that essay I wrote, I sent you that essay. That essay was entitled
Okay.
mute that.
I got it under control. Yeah. God, please continue, Rupanuga Prabhu.
All right. So, let's see where I was thinking. Oh, no, I lost my train of thought. What did I say? What was I saying?
You were saying that you were the first family in ISKCON.
Yeah, I said that. Okay. So then what?
No, you're talking about how confusing it is.
Oh. Like I was talking about the essay I wrote. I
Right.
wrote the essay for a purpose, to focus the devotee community on what's happening, why it's happening. Why it's happening. This is important. We have to know why things go. Because Srila Prabhupada said we have to see things from Krishna's perspective. Now, nobody knows Krishna's perspective better than Srila Prabhupada, which means we have to see things from his perspective in order to understand Krishna's perspective, right? So I wrote this essay from Srila Prabhupada's and Krishna's perspective with no speculation here. It was just straight from their perspective, which we can do because they show us what their perspective is. Okay, we don't have to speculate.
I can actually call that up right at this very second here.
I can read it. I can read it to you.
Here it is for everybody to see. Do you see it? I've got it on the screen
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. According to Srila Prabhupada, is where it starts. According to Srila Prabhupada Vani, you see, this is important. This is very important because what happened at the time of Srila Prabhupada's disappearance was that the GBC was supposed to guide a grieving society from dependence on Srila Prabhupada Vapu and Srila Prabhupada Vani to Srila Prabhupada Vani alone. He always said that Vani was more important than Vapu. So they should have led the society in his deep grief from the Vapu dependence to the Vani dependence. Because Srila Prabhupada never went anywhere. All he did was transform himself into his Vani. All the potency Srila Prabhupada had was all transferred into his instructions. He's living in his instructions. He never went anywhere. He's in his pictures, he's in his deities, he's in his books, and especially he's in his lectures because they're not in any way interpolated. They are direct. Srila Prabhupada direct. So at the beginning of this essay, you left the first line out, according to Srila Prabhupada Vani. See, we have to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada Vani to know what's going on. According to that, at present, this world is being managed by the Rakshasas. That's a big statement. The Rakshasas are man-eaters who eat their own sons. And, quote, at present, especially on this planet, the influence of Lord Brahma has decreased considerably. And the representatives of Hiranyakashipu, the Rakshasas and demons, have taken charge. Therefore, there's no protection of Brahminical culture in cows, which are the basic prerequisites for all kinds of good fortune. This age is very dangerous because society is being managed by demons and Rakshasas. That's big.
Yeah.
That explains so much right there. Can you expect? And then I go on, I say, years ago, well, I can skip the next paragraph. Well, I'll read it anyway. Years ago in college student days, having read the popular underground book entitled None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which in essence indicated that the world was being controlled and manipulated by a few extremely wealthy and powerful families, and having later read the above quote in Srila Prabhupada's Raja Vidya, two devotees approached Srila Prabhupada in 1974 at his quarters in Mayapur Dham. And some of the names mentioned in None Dare Call It Conspiracy were still very much influential in the world, and he was asked if these were the Rakshasas he was referring to, and Srila Prabhupada replied, yes. So I'll tell you what happened after that. So I said to Srila Prabhupada, what do we do? How do we approach them? What can we do about it? He said, preach to them. So I'm thinking, and Balavanta's is sitting next to me, he's thinking, well, how in the world are we going to, approach them? How? Here we are, 1974, okay? So Srila Prabhupada could see that we were confused. So he said, anyway, the power is in the people. That I didn't print here. The power is in the people. Now, what power is he talking about? He's talking about the power of resistance, which we see being ignored. And he's talking about the dormant Krishna consciousness in their hearts. That's their real power. And we're the only ones who know how to ignite that. We're the only ones who know how to bring that power out. And that is Harinam. We go on. The Rakshasas are not passive. Their well-loved matrix of infrastructure of control covers the whole planet. And their minions are involved in every aspect of modern societies and nations, including political, scientific, legal, educational, economic, military, and so on, endeavors all around the world. An international, very deep state. Absolute control, mastership over whatever they survey is the goal of the Rakshasa agenda at any cost. And their seemingly unlimited financial strength is a means to that end. Quote, now great regimes have been created to smash so many people for the satisfaction of the Rakshasas' senses. Page 41 of Rajavidya. That's what war is about. And this smashing is coming in so many ways besides war, and it will come to that also if what's described below continues. The current global chaos is being revealed or unfolded as an epic story of karma and the laws of material nature. Since the time of Lord Buddha 2,600 years ago, who appeared primarily to stop ahimsa, cow killing in India much greater in size than today, those slaughterhouses have now covered the globe. In addition, facilities have been constructed for billions of innocent land animals and sea creatures to be slaughtered annually. Over the centuries, the world has become a killing field. The free will of human beings has brought all this about simply for the satisfaction of the human tongue. The propaganda that one must eat meat or flesh, including fish and eggs, in order to be strong and healthy is contradicted in nature. The strongest animals on earth, namely the gorilla, the elephant, the hippopotamus, and the giraffe, are all vegetarians. One video I saw demonstrated how a giraffe easily kicked a pursuing lion high in the air.
Wow.
The killing fields includes human abortions. It may be uncertain which of the many human abortions are abortions of those who themselves caused abortions in the past, like parents or surgeons who are getting their just karma.
Ooh.
In any case, Srila Prabhupada comments in LA 52672 that, quote, one chance, given that it will get a body and come out and may be able to come to Krishna consciousness, that opportunity is lost. He's being killed within the womb. Undoubtedly, much karma is coming upon the people of the world for the millions upon millions of abortions each year. 43 million abortions last year.
Wow.
And those are recorded surgical abortions. That didn't count the morning after pill or any kind of mechanical means or chemical means. So
Wow.
it's probably much, much larger than that. Okay, next paragraph. Oh, I want to make a point here. Srila Prabhupada, knowing that, and he's saying before that many people are getting aborted because they aborted people in the past, he didn't take that into consideration. What he's saying here is that everyone has the right to be born, so they have a chance, even those people who committed this sin before themselves, so that they have a chance also of being able to be devotees.
And if
Another
I may
thing
add,
is certain.
Rupanuga, I may add, I was reading in Prabhupada's conversations, it was quite an eye-opener. He was saying that those who eat their mother, who eat the cow, in the next life, their karma is that they will be killed by their own mother as an abortion. That's the karma. Yeah.
The karma has to be there. It's rolled out on a global level right now. Let me go on. Another thing is certain. The dairy cows and all the other animals and sea creatures being slaughtered every moment are innocent. It is not their karma. Dairy cows are meant to take birth in the next life as human beings in the mode of goodness. In Vedic culture, the cow and bull are considered one's mother and father. And as Lord Chaitanya criticized the Kazi, what is this religion that allows killing of the father and mother? In a real sense, is not killing and eating such a father and a mother another cannibalism? Next paragraph, so much free will killing of children and innocent creatures has not been sanctioned. What to speak of the many offenses to Mother Nature in the name of progress and industrialization? It's over. The karmic payback is here. The modes of material nature rule, and as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Devotees are in the karma and vikarma world, but not of it. During a lecture in Hawaii, January 23rd, 74, Srila Prabhupada explained, quote, trying to avoid offenses, that is namabas. Namabas means not actually pure name, but almost pure. In namabas stage, not pure, marginal, between pure and offensive, there is mukti. You become mukta, liberated from material bondage. End quote. This means beyond the control of the karmas which control the general population and pseudo devotees. Next paragraph. He goes on to explain that such a sincere chanter, although sometimes a little mechanical by force, still he is not a show bottle. This means that such a devotee is beyond the pale of the present karmic interactions, actors, and demands. He or she must use intelligence regarding one's own health. As Srila Prabhupada once said, quote, the duration of life is our most precious possession. Paragraph. Since the Rakshasas are in control according to Srila Prabhupada, therefore anything being promoted by those in charge of communications or programs as being for the greater good, well-being, or benefit of anyone should simply be seen as, as the opposite of the truth. The Rakshasas identified by His divine grace are cannibals, eating their own sons and doubtless the sons of others when they ran out of their own. Policies implemented by these predators and their followers must be ignored as conspiracies and circumvented. Research concerning the truthfulness or falsities of circumstances surrounding COVID-19 is correct if it leads to exposure of the sinister agenda of the Rakshasas. In other words, if the sinister agenda of the Rakshasas' operating principle is behind everything, according to Srila Prabhupada, then the worldwide implementation of the inoculations is sinister, since nothing that extensive could be beyond the Rakshasas' control. Common sense. Therefore, devotees are beyond any proposed universal obligation to accept inoculations. Never mind the claims of politicians and professionals who insist otherwise, because they are leaders blind to the messages of Srila Prabhupada intended for everyone's benefit. And devotees advising against this explanation should be avoided. The Rakshasas and their minions. Stop.
GBC.
No, I'm just saying I like your strong words that such devotees should be avoided.
Yes. The final paragraph. Now I'm finished.
Please continue.
The Rakshasas and their minions believe this is a very important to understand. This is the point. The Rakshasas and their minions believe they are in control, but actually they are themselves under the control of the modes of material nature. They are behaving as expected and simultaneously acting as delivery systems for global karma.
Wow.
In effect, there is a cleansing process going on worldwide to prepare or clear the path for Lord Chaitanya's movement in this year 535, Garubda, the Golden Age. At the same time, there is a, quote, boiling of the milk going forward within that movement, a boiling which Srila Prabhupada began prior to his disappearance. As long as the slaughterhouses remain open, the cleansing and culling of the general population will continue. The boiling of the milk will also continue as needed. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, the world Acharya.
Jai.
Fantastic.
This should be read by every
Wonderful.
devotee.
Yeah,
Every devotee in ISKCON and out, because it explains everything, all from Srila Prabhupada's point of view. And this is what makes Srila Prabhupada the world Acharya. This is what makes him the world Acharya. He's the only one who has been preaching Achinta Beta Beta Tattva all over the planet. Achinta Beta Beta Tattva is the highest possible understanding of God, relationship with God, possible by the human mind. And there's nobody who has been preaching that but Srila Prabhupada. The closest thing is Ramanujacharya, is unity and diversity. But Achinta Beta Beta Tattva was preached by Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Lord himself. And Srila Prabhupada is the only person who has preached that all over the world. He delivered 250 lectures on the 1972 Macmillan Gita around the world in 37 cities and 14 countries. Nobody can replicate that. He is the embodiment of the teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He included their teachings in his purports. There's no other need to go for outside instruction in Srila Prabhupada's books. It's all there because he's fully Srila Prabhupada Vani, fully. Devotees have to realize that, and they have to take shelter of his books, and more than that, they have to take shelter of his lectures. He said that the sound vibration, it was originally all Shruti anyway, is very important. And that's direct association with Srila Prabhupada. And that's what the world needs. These icons of Einstein and who else? Oh, and those communists, who are they? Einstein, and there's Gandhi, and there's
Martin
Huh?
Martin Luther King.
Well, no, the communists.
Oh, communists.
Marx and Lenin. These are the world icons. They have to be replaced by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada has to replace these materialistic icons.
Uh-huh.
He has to become known as the world Acharya. As he said, the Bhagavad Gita is not part of the Vedas. It is universal. And Srila Prabhupada is a universal creature. He's the only non-sectarian speaker on this planet. He has to be recognized, and that is our duty as his disciples and followers. Disciples' duty is, first of all, to spread his teachings. Purely, unadulterated, uninterpolated, unalloyed, with enthusiasm, conviction, determination. That is our duty. And that hasn't changed. So we can be locked up in all kinds of debate and controversy. And let me explain where controversy comes from. What creates controversy? When an instruction or an order of Srila Prabhupada is ignored, which is one of the offenses to the holy name, Namaparad, or contravened, or superseded, or interpolated, instantly a controversy is created. That's where they come from. And right now, the devotees are swimming in a sea of controversies.
Yes.
Fall or not fall, flat or not flat,
Edit or not edit.
edit or not edit. That's the biggest one. The controversies are just
And also jab or not jab.
right. You name it. You name it. There's a million of controversies. But the most important controversy is having around the books, because the books are the Vani. The books are the instructions. And also, just to guard against editing, we have the lectures recorded.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important, because that's association with Srila Prabhupada, especially for new people. It's very important. They have a lot of association with Srila Prabhupada. And I can tell you this. I sat in front of Srila Prabhupada in that storefront every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 o'clock, and every morning for Bhagavatam class. And I can tell you with full, firm, truthful conviction that sitting in front of him on that storefront is no different from my sitting in front of my CD player with my eyes closed. There's absolutely no difference whatsoever.
Right.
He's totally there in sound. He's totally in his Vani. Srila Prabhupada Vani. It's absolute.
Just move your camera down a tiny bit because we're getting everything from your, yeah.
This way?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Ah,
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
sorry, like I told you, I'm a nitwit about computers.
No, very good. So so yes, so what we're hearing from Prabhupada's lectures, it's the same as being in front of Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue.
Exactly. Absolutely. I can attest to it because I've done both. I've done both.
I also feel though when I read Prabhupada's books, like I'm reading Bhagavatam right now, and I can hear his voice while I'm reading.
Well, that's a blessing for you because you're new compared to me. So let me tell you, let me make a quote from Lord Jesus Christ, who was a Shaktavesh avatar, so I can quote him. He told his followers once, he said, "Blessed are you who believe in my words because you can see me. More blessed but more blessed than you are those in the future who believe in my words without seeing me."
Ah,
The same thing applies to Srila Prabhupada and his books. One doesn't have to see Srila Prabhupada in person. He's there in the books too, and you're right. I'm not saying the books are unimportant. I'm just repeating what he said. In fact, I have it here written down somewhere. I don't have much faith in storing things in computers, so I keep 5x7 index cards, which I sort of like write things on.
Prabhupada said that the way to remember things in Kali Yuga is to write them down.
Yes. Let's see, something about hearing. I had written. I put. Oh, here it is. Here it is. He said, this is Srila Prabhupada speaking in a lecture in LA in November 68. He says, reading or hearing. You may not have time to read, but try to read. If you have no time, you are hearing. We are publishing literature, books. I am trying to speak to you. That is also understanding, studying Krishna science. Rather, hearing is better reception. If you hear, therefore, Vedas are known as Shruti. Shruti means it is received through hearing, real progressive hearing. That in this age, Kali Yuga, people cannot study so much. So he was emphasizing hearing here. That's what I'm emphasizing. I'm not saying that books are not important at all. He said, my books are recorded. He said, my books are recorded hearing. So that's the same. Well, I'm just pointing out that there is a dimension to hearing Srila Prabhupada. That's an addition. You may feel his presence when you read, that's true. But hearing his presence is another addition. I'm pointing it out, especially for new people, because it is questionable. As some of these books, let me
Yes, Rupanuga Prabhu, I'd like to attest to it. When you were our GBC back in 77 in Ottawa, you brought us reel-to-reel tapes. We made cassettes from them. And this was even before the Bhaktivedanta Archives got some of those 1966 tapes. And you hear Prabhupada speaking, his voice is cracking with emotion. His voice cracks. He's so fired up.
Yeah, he's very emphatic. Srila Prabhupada is a very emphatic preacher. And that's what they do with the Gita and other books. They remove emphasizing on the plea of redundancy, you see. So let me show you here. One second. Okay. Here we are. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right. This is the original, and this is a paltry imitation. In this one over here, they've taken out 46 of the planings. Okay, they've even taken out the disciplic succession, and they have put in a picture of a cow being murdered. Okay. Srila Prabhupada told Ray Rama, who was the first editor of BTG, when he wanted to do a story on butchery, he said, don't you include a picture of a cow being murdered, you will spoil the whole thing.
Mm.
What they've done is they put this picture, this complete concoction of a man with a cow's head and a cow with a man's head, which is not anywhere in Shastra. And they spoiled the book. And they made dioramas out of it. So the quality of the paper, the appearance of the book, and all the reviews they've included in the original book were included in this other book as if it was also authorized. All those positive reviews that came in from so many different experts in various fields of academia, politicians, Sanskrit scholars, psychologists, sociologists, all of them like Srila Prabhupada's book. And they printed all those in their revised book as if that was approving this book, but it wasn't. It was for this book. So you see, you can't compare them. The KBI's edition is so beautiful and the paper is so good and all the color pictures are there.
Now allegedly the BBT is now publishing that original 72 version.
Not many. They have published some of it out of demand. Actually, the person who really did the work was Bhima Prabhu in India. In India, they've been publishing the original for decades.
Uh-huh.
So when they published 200,000 of them a few years ago, BBT bought some or took some. They keep that as a as sort of like a placation, placate the people who object. They don't sell many of them. They don't encourage them to be sold either.
Oh,
They're just there.
A memento.
They're just there.
Can I share something with you?
They have thousands of unpaid free book distributors all over the planet that are distributing their revised books. They don't care. Initially, they wanted the book to go out of print.
Right.
And
No, they've even made it illegal at some temples. If you have that original Bhagavad Gita, it's banned.
Well,
You can't give class from the original.
No, I don't give class. I've been in Alaska now since 2014. Before that, I was here from '89 to 2003, and I never gave a class because my books are banned. My books are banned. The books I've been reading now since '72 are banned. So I'm banned. If they're going to ban Srila Prabhupada Vani, they're banning me.
Lochanananda Prabhu at the New York Temple on Hoyt and Skirmerhorn, are you allowed to give a Bhagavad Gita class from the original Gita?
I wouldn't have it any other way. In fact, I had a disciple. His name was Krishna Seva. And when he saw that the second chapter, verse 13, had been changed in the edited edition, it says a sober person is not bewildered by the change of body. Whereas in the original, it says a self-realized soul is not bewildered by the change of body. He said he will never again pick up the edited edition. And he asked me for an original copy of the Gita, which I gave to him. And that was one of the reasons that the local board of council directors would not allow me to perform further initiations because of that incident.
Well, you see, this is a perfect example. When all these gurus and all the GBC and all their assistants and all these temple presidents, they should be up in arms. All of them who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada should have been protesting this book change thing all along instead of going along with it. See, that's the way I judge people. When I want to have someone in my home, they have to pass two examinations. One, do you accept Srila Prabhupada as your highest spiritual authority in your life? Two, do you object to the interpolations of his books? And if they say no to either one of them, they're not welcome.
I can appreciate that. I totally agree, actually. And, you know, now I have this also, this copy of the Gita, and I read from that when I read Gita. But, you know, I just wanted to say, like, when I was just joining, like the first year that I was starting to chant, you know, you go through the struggles of realizing what it all means, you know. And I had basically like broken up with my girlfriend and given up different things and associations, and I was sitting there just so frustrated, you know, like frustrated at devotees for tricking me and frustrated at myself. And then, you know, what do? I picked up the Gita, and I had the, you know, the modern version of the Gita, and I just opened it up, you know, just out of despair. And I opened it up. What do I read? Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasti shupajayati, etc. So just right there, you know, I opened the Gita, and it taught me exactly, it showed me exactly what I needed to hear. And that day changed my life, you know, be it from an old version, a new version, like that moment that I read that verse, you know, one who contemplates the objects of senses, and then the whole cycle starts from there. I was like, wow, this is exactly where I am right now. And that moment changed my life. So I have to attest to that, you know, although I agree with everything has been said. Prabhupada changed my life with that verse. He shared that verse at the perfect moment for me.
It's not that some things Srila Prabhupada translated don't get through. It's not that. It's the principle behind it all of changing in the first place. As he remarked to Jayadutta one time, he said, how can I be making mistakes? I'm simply preaching. See, Srila Prabhupada he didn't have the four defects, imperfect senses. He didn't have those four defects. And it's taking a while for us to realize it. He's infallible. What he gave us was infallible knowledge. And if he was doubtful about something, he would say so. If he says he heard it from somebody else, he would say that. You might check into it. But if he said like a simple thing like feed a cold to starve a fever, that made it absolute. If he said take a little bit of ginger in the morning and it'll help your digestion the whole day, that's absolute. Right? So you turn to the right verse. But suppose you turn to the one that had the cow being murdered. But suppose you turn to that one. The Lord in the heart is in your heart, and he guided you to which verse? He's the one who opened it for you. But suppose another person had turned to the one with the cow being murdered.
You know, the ISKCON artist Bharadwaj, I asked him about that painting where the man has like a bull's head and he's cutting the cow's head, which looks human. I said, did Prabhupada ever see that? He said, no, absolutely not.
Huh.
And he said, I wouldn't use that painting to depict hell. That's how disgusting he thought it was.
I heard that painting was done by Parikit Prabhu, and that his parents cut him out of their will when they saw that painting. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I heard.
There's a devotee who had that painting tattooed on his body permanently. Prabhupada used to screen every painting. And I don't know if anyone screened that one before it came out, plus the diorama that you mentioned. How do you preach from that? What do you preach?
Who knows? He did know the paintings because he did review them. However, some paintings did get by. Like there's one I just saw the other day, I forget where it was. There's a picture of Garbhodaksha Vishnu and Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma's perspective is above, looking down. And Srila Prabhupada says you never portray someone above Krishna. When he saw that painting, but somehow or another, he still got the book. See, so some things got by Srila Prabhupada because he couldn't supervise everything all the time. That's why he had appointed leaders and managers.
Well, those managers are not doing a very good job of screening anything.
They should screen themselves.
You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, there are about, 500 verses, more than 500 verses that have some changes made, including the very first verse of the Gita. And I brought this to the attention of Jayadvaita Maharaj, who's actually a friend of mine from when I first came to New York in 1972. I met him then. And I said, why is there no annotation for any of the changes that were made? 5,000? He said, if we were to put a footnote or to annotate every change, it would add 300 pages to the book. Just to give you
ask him why, from 1972 to 77, when he was reading the book, he was giving classes on the book, and he was also writing essays based on the book, and he was an editor also. And ask him why he didn't come to Srila Prabhupada with a handful of changes. He and all the other editors, all the people all over the world who were reading and studying and writing papers based on that Bhagavad Gita, never anyone came forward with even a handful of suggested changes to Srila Prabhupada? Why they waited for 6 years after his disappearance? What is the explanation? Okay, and all these reviewers who liked the book, nobody made a comment of even a humble little suggestion. All these years, he delivered 250 lectures on that book around the world. And where was the commentary from anybody suggest a single change? Give me one example.
I brought this to him. I said to him, we know that many scholars appreciated Srila Prabhupada's original Bhagavad Gita and gave testimony to their authoritativeness. I said, how many scholars, academicians, professors have written to you to praise the revisions that you made? He said, not one. Not one.
That's because people take that book on face value as being approved by Srila Prabhupada. That's why they put all those reviews in that book. They don't belong in that book. They weren't about that book. They're about the 72 Gita, not the 83. Right. In fact, most of those people are passed away by 83.
Yeah. Oh my God, get that off the screen. I brought that up to the whoever was printing the Back to Godhead magazine, because they had a comment made by Shalagram Shukla, who was a professor, I believe, at George Washington University.
Yeah, Georgetown
University.
Yes.
And he was praising the Bhagavad Gita. They put that quotation in the Back to Godhead magazine to advertise the revised edition of the Gita.
Right.
And I said, you cannot do that, because that's not. And I actually tried to contact Shalagram Shukla over that.
I did too.
Know.
I did too. I sent him a copy of the revised version, but I got no comment because he was an older man. I think he was pretty much retired. He wrote the most beautiful review of all.
He really did. Prabhupada was praised by so many scholars. Unbelievable.
But aside from that, he wasn't looking for their authorization. He didn't need anybody's authorization. What he was looking for was authentication, and he got it. He got authentication. Their business was not to be critics. Their business was not to make any offering. But his disciples are a different story. They were preaching from that book, reading from the, memorizing the verses, giving classes, going to engagements, quoting from that book from 1972 until 77. And not a single soul came forward with even a handful of suggestions for changes. Why is that? And that includes the editorial staff, includes Jayadeva himself, who was writing, speaking, lecturing. Where? Oh, so the Planet of the Trees, big deal. That's practically like a typo. It's a transcription error. It's not important, really. It's anything. Bishop Bob would expect that to be changed. They cite that all the time. Another verse about churning the sea or something. They cite that one too. These are almost like typos, you know. But when Srila Prabhupada was an emphatic preacher, he gave so much strength and emphasis to many things, and they call that redundancy. Because wherever there's an emphasis about something, I noticed that they reduce it, the power. You see, Srila Prabhupada was an emphatic preacher. You listen to his life; he's not very passive. He's strong. He's loud, and he's convincing. You see. So they lost the voice. It was Srila Prabhupada's conviction that convinced us. We had nothing. Srila Prabhupada was our worshipable deity sitting up on that dais. We didn't even know what Krishna looked like. We didn't know who Krishna was. But Srila Prabhupada was our worshipable deity. And he gave us the truth. He convinced us by, he convinced us by his conviction.
Yeah. Prabhupada never asked for the Bhagavad Gita to be re-edited. That we know for sure. When in 1976, there was a plan to print the Bhagavad Gita 1.5 million copies. If he wanted something changed, wouldn't he have done that before that size printing? It took 76 railroad cars to transport the paper to print that many books.
It was a first in the industry. It never had been done before. One book published that many volumes in one edition. Kingston Press. And they had a big meeting about it. It was a big, it was a big interview. The media was all there. It was a big deal. A million copies.
Did you ever hear Srila Prabhupada speak about the principle of Arsha Prayoga?
Yes.
He said that to honor the Acharya, even if you find something that you consider to be a mistake, you don't change it. In this way, the Acharya is honored. They did the exact opposite, which means they dishonored him. They made him diminutive, like a conditioned soul, practically.
That's because they considered that he could make mistakes. Because they're conditioned souls and they make mistakes. So they see things. They see things from their point of view. The fact of the matter is, a person on Srila Prabhupada's level doesn't make mistakes. That point is that verse is saying it appears to be. It may seem to be, but it's really not. It's like Srila Prabhupada said, how can I make mistakes? I'm just preaching. You see, but they're thinking grammatically. This is the whole thing. There were 600 Gitas before Srila Prabhupada. What happened? Nobody could decipher or decode the deeper meaning of the Sanskrit, and they just spent their whole time on the Sanskrit level and had to speculate because they couldn't understand. They couldn't do anything better because they couldn't get to the meaning. So therefore, all those 600 Gitas had no effect. When Srila Prabhupada came out, it had effect because it was deciphered, it was decoded, it was explained in the purports. But these other people didn't have that power because they weren't in the disciplic succession. They were not authorized. So it simply gave speculations. And nobody became a devotee of Krishna.
Didn't Srila Prabhupada use Dr. Radha Krishnan's translations before he completed his
Yeah,
work?
we when we were in the storefront, we used Dr. Radhakrishna's book. We didn't have Srila Prabhupada's book. He was working on it, but he told us, don't read the purports,
Uh, right.
because it was all this purport. He said the Sanskrit translation weren't that bad. He told that to Harigriva to hurry up the process. Just use Radha or use somebody. Harigriva said, "Oh, this is be plagiarizing. We can't do that." Srila Prabhupada says, "You can't plagiarize what Krishna says."
Mhm.
So, we used Dr. Radhakrishna's, but I still have a copy. But he said, don't, it could naturally. I had to look at something purport. And that was the purport where Srila Prabhupada later on talks about that Radhakrishna wrote about. It's not to Krishna, but to the within Krishna that you're
The unborn.
the unborn, just like we are. See, it's like making Krishna one of us.
Hmm.
Mm.
In my case, when I was 17 years old, I asked my music teacher at St. John's High, I'm just trying to understand what the purpose in life is. I want to be a recording engineer. They're telling me I have to study biology, 3 sciences, I have to chop frogs. I don't want to do that. I'm so frustrated. He said, you come to my house, I have something for you. And he gave me, amongst Siddhartha and The Art of Loving, The Art of Dying by Eric Fromm, he gave me a penguin, a little pocketbook, penguin classic version of Bhagavad Gita by some Spanish translator. And it had no purports, but there was enough Bhagavad Gita in there that it was like it gave me a little bit of it was like a little bit of an hors d'oeuvre, so to speak, a
Right.
little something, which got me interested. So when I got Prabhupada's big Macmillan one, I was like, wow, this is the real Bhagavad Gita. So little something was there.
There was one phrase that was redacted. It was removed from the Gita. The rod of chastisement. It's not there anymore. It's gone.
Really?
Yeah, it's gone.
Let me tell you, the one thing we understood from the get-go was we could not offend Swamiji. If we offended Swamiji, we were finished. We understood that he was a bona fide representative of Krishna, and we had to respect him. And one of the first things I learned was not to speculate on the mind of the Acharya.
Mm.
That was considered an offense. So we were very careful. I mean, at least the boys I knew there, we were aware that we had to be very careful not to offend Srila Prabhupada. I mean, that was in the back of our minds. We always were respectful to him. And we didn't have a deity. We didn't have books. We didn't have so many things that everybody takes for granted when they join the movement. Temples and farm projects and books and a whole protocol, so many things.
Srila Prabhupada was your everything.
Yes. We didn't even have bead bags. My first bead bag was a money bag from the money bag factory across the street. A blue denim money bag, just big enough to hold the beads. But it worked fine. I could wrap the ribbon around my wrist. I could stick my finger through the hole where the ribbon came through, and I used it for a bead bag. Because you can imagine how difficult it was to chant on a set of beads 7 feet long around your neck.
Was that those big red beads from the
right.
hobby store?
That's right.
You made your own, right? You made.
Oh yeah, it took me 4.5 hours.
That's hardcore. Hardcore making your own japa beads.
But I stringed them with nylon cord, and they lasted for many years.
Don't have them anymore. You don't
I have them. I chant on them every day.
Well, show them to us.
You want to see them?
Yeah.
Do you want to see them really?
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Wait a minute, I have to get them.
We'll wait right here.
Hey, Ramanath Sukha, so happy you could come, Prabhu. I see you came
I'm,
down
I'm
from
glad
the
to be here. I'm a little tired, but yeah, I'm glad
I
to be here.
see you've come down from the higher planetary system again from
No,
Swargalope.
I'm still floating.
You got me floating round and round. Do you remember Raman? Do you remember Rupanuga Prabhu from the good old days?
Oh yeah.
Where did you
I don't
first?
know if he remembers me.
Where do you remember Rupanuga Prabhu from?
Atlanta Temple, 1973.
This is
He
Ramanath
was
Sukha.
a sannyasi.
He was
You know,
Pujari.
you were sannyasi in GBC Atlanta, along with Balavanta was the TP of Atlanta. I was just a new devotee.
This is
I
Ramanath
don't think you
Sukha
remember
Prabhu.
me.
He's serving in the UK, but I first met him in Philadelphia when he was cooking at Govinda's restaurant on South Street.
Let's see those beads.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Drum roll. Brrrr.
Can we focus in on them?
Stop talking. You start talking, Rupanuga, and then we'll get you. Your voice will make your picture bigger.
Okay.
Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
here
Hare.
we are.
Wow.
And all the devotees had beads like that, right? Were they all red or some were blue?
Some are blue, some are green.
Cool.
7 feet of beads.
7
Oh,
feet. Wow.
God.
That's a lot of beads to fit into a money bag.
That's right.
That's the real money. That's the real cash right there. That's the real gold.
I still can't find bead bags big enough.
We have to find someone who can sew them. Big one for you. Custom made in Vrindavan.
There was a letter that Prabhupada wrote to Jayadvaita Swami that when Jayadvaita Swami had suggested a change be made in a verse in chapter 12 of the Gita. And Prabhupada wrote back and said it is not necessary to make any changes in that verse.
It was a
So,
purport. It was a purport mainly, and he did the changes.
purport, right, yeah.
He made the changes anyway.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Later on?
No, and there's 83.
Yeah, right.
He made the changes for the 83 version, even though Shil Baba told him not to.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Oh.
what you said.
Wow.
Guru Aparad.
And my
Ouch.
wife did a essay. It was called "The Hidden Co-Authors," in which this is back in
Oh, yeah.
75 or so, in which she showed that verse and purport. You see what he did. Sometimes Shil Prabhupada would say the regulative principles of bhakti, of yoga, of devotional service. He wasn't talking about the 4 regs.
Mm.
He was talking about the whole thing. And Jayadvaita wanted to make the correction, see, based on his understanding, that when Shil Prabhupada talked about regulative principles, he was always talking about 4 regulative. But no, often he was talking about the devotional principles or the regulative principles of devotion, including all of it, Mangal Artik, kirtans, everything. One's a general statement and one is a specific statement about the 4 regulative principles. So I think that was a confusion there. He was trying to read Shil Prabhupada. He was trying to understand Shil Prabhupada. And I was speculating on the mind of Acharya. You can't do that.
Prabhu, I appreciated so much when you said Prabhupada's books contain everything because he quotes the Acharyas in his book. So there's no need to go read other books. This is interesting to me because I see a lot of senior devotees like reading different books written by different people. And to me as a younger person, it's telling me that, oh, well, Prabhupada's books contain everything in theory, but we still like to go read other books. But hearing you say that, it inspires me, because I also think that Prabhupada said everything and you can't necessarily get something more elsewhere. But yeah, maybe you could...
I'll explain that a little further.
Yeah, please.
Shil Prabhupada said, I'm looking for my card here. Sometimes I file them in the wrong place. What he said was, You cannot understand my spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta, by reading books. He said, you have to go through me. He said the same thing about Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And I was just trying to find it. I'll find it for later, but he said the same thing. And he said in that comment, there's no need to go to any outside. Oh, that's it. Okay, hold on. It's filed under O. Outside instruction. That's what you're asking.
Right.
So this parampara system, you cannot imagine what my spiritual master said, or even if you read some books, you cannot understand unless you understand from me. You cannot jump over to the superior guru, neglecting the next acharya. In other words, you can't jump over me and go to a previous acharya. Here we are again. This, oh, that was from a lecture transcribed personally, but unfortunately I lost the location. But this one I didn't. This one's a letter, 12/25/73, to Guru Kripa and Yasodhananda. Whatever is to be learned of the teaching of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur can be learned from our books. There is no need whatsoever for any outside instruction. And he's talking about previous acharyas here. Outside instruction. So that's why I made the point that Srila Prabhupada included what we needed to know about the previous acharyas in his purports. He gave us the essence. His purports are the essence of the parampara teaching. That we have to understand. He's the last great acharya in our line. And his books are the law books for the next 9,500 years. So we don't need another acharya. We've got it. Okay. When these devotees, and I'll say it, these devotees who are going and acting scholarly in such a way, they're simply trying to have some distinction. Profit, adoration, and distinction are subtle manifestations of sex, gross sex. And this idea of looking for profit, adoration, and distinction is subtle sex life. And when devotees try to be distinct by quoting something that nobody ever heard before, or from a book that nobody ever read, or especially from a previous acharya like Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Bhaktisiddhanta, and they're doing that. Why? Because they don't know Srila Prabhupada's books, or they want to appear to be special. That I've got some special knowledge. I've got something I can reveal to you that Srila Prabhupada didn't. And there's some people that say that Srila Prabhupada didn't teach us the higher Raghunagara principles because we weren't ready for it. But that's nonsense. Anybody who reads Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar Devotion, gets all the internal realizations. It's all there in print. In 1966, one time Srila Prabhupada came down for Bhagavatam class. And he said, this morning, we're going to speak from Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was writing Chaitanya Charitamrita at that time, and he brought down some of the work he'd been doing to speak to us. And when he was finished, he asked what we thought about it. He said, Brahmananda, what do you think? So Brahmananda didn't say anything. He looked at me, he said, Rupanuga, what do you think? I had to say something. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, or Swamiji, I am surprised that you're reading to us or teaching to us from Chaitanya Charitamrita, which you said was a postgraduate study of our movement, where we're just off the street. That was my comment. And those lectures that he gave the next week were all included in the introduction, I believe. So Srila Prabhupada gave us the nectar from the beginning. Even though we are still wet behind the ears, he came and he preached right from Chaitanya Charitamrita, of course.
Rupanuga Prabhu, I've noticed that some of those early lectures 66, 67, 68. Yeah, Prabhupada was getting into some extremely esoteric topics
Absolutely.
in those early lectures.
Mhm.
But then he kind of toned it down as if he was realizing that it was too much for the earlier devotees. Or I don't know, it's hard, I'm speculating, but I know some of those early lectures, he was going right into the essential material of Chaitanya Charitamrita, very elevated topics.
Yes, even before the Gita was published. Okay.
Yes.
So, but then, like you said, in the beginning, we were lenient, but then we have to become more strict. So he began to explain to us that there was a hierarchy. First, Bhagavad Gita, second, Bhagavatam, next, Chaitanya Charitamrita. But
Now,
those days,
I wanted to ask you a question, because in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are some verses where he concludes saying, for more information, you go to such and such work by the Goswamis. But he didn't translate those books, but he said, you can research more by going to the Goswami literature. So it wasn't like he was
well, let me
giving us
clarify.
permission to jump over his authority, but he was saying that the Goswamis are also fair game, so to speak, in terms of
No.
understanding consciousness.
Listen. Back in May 27th or 28th, 77, we had our last GBC meeting with Srila Prabhupada. And also because GBC members are also BBT members, there was a BBT discussion. And one of the questions they asked was, can we translate the writings of previous acharyas after you've departed? Can we, he said, you have to be very realized to do that. I don't think we have anyone who is qualified. So this is.
What about Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita by what's his name?
Gopi
Pranadhana Prabhu.
Yeah.
It's
You can say
amazing
that.
work by Sanatana Goswami that Prabhupada never had a chance to translate or comment on.
I don't want to get into these controversies, but I can just say that Gopi Pranadhana was.
I'm not saying he was realized.
I'm not saying it was.
I'm not saying. And in fact, some of his commentary, I don't agree with.
So let me explain. I spoke to Pradyumna Prabhu, who was trained up in Sanskrit and Bengali by Srila Prabhupada personally. He was a created Brahmin, okay, from nothing. Okay. I asked him what his opinion was of that book. Had he read any of it? He said, I read part of it. He said, and there were many mistakes in the Sanskrit.
Mistakes in the Sanskrit. Okay.
Many mistakes. Yeah, I'm just telling you that because I was trying to get Pradyumna for years. I was trying to get him to finish the Bhagavatam. I'm still going to go for it. And so anyway, that's one point. I'm not going to criticize anyone, but I'm saying that Gopi Pranadhana worked in tandem with Jayadeva in the revision.
Yeah.
He worked in tandem on the word for word in Sanskrit. But what I'm saying is, according to Pradyumna, now Pradyumna, let me make this point. It's very important. There are only two devotees authorized by Srila Prabhupada to write Shastra or to comment on Shastra. One was Pradyumna and one was Swarup Damodar. Swarup Damodar was asked by Srila Prabhupada to write a scientific commentary on Vedanta Sutra. And when he was here in America before the bombing, I was preaching to him about not getting entangled with who's going to really be in charge of BI and all this other fighting that was going on. It was very stressful for him. I said, look, why don't you just concentrate on that work with the Vedanta Sutra? It will be a very great contribution to the world. I try to convince him to forget about BI, let them fight over it, or so on, just work on this. Okay. But then within a few months, this bombing happened. So those are only two persons that were authorized by Srila Prabhupada to write commentaries on Shastra. That's important.
Does that mean that we cannot, unless personally authorized by Prabhupada, we are not allowed to comment on Shastra?
Well, who are we to comment on Shastra? We're conditioned souls. We have imperfect senses.
But it's a matter of hermeneutics. Someone has to comment on it.
Yeah, someone has already commented on Srila Prabhupada. It's not hermeneutics. We don't apply these mundane logics to our Shastra. We apply Srila Prabhupada's instructions. He says, listen, to be fair, realize, my question to you is, what are we going to find out that's more than what Srila Prabhupada gave us? He gave us the essence of the parampara system, which includes all the previous acharyas. Why do we have to go to previous acharyas to understand more than what Srila Prabhupada gave us? I say we're not competent enough. First of all, we're conditioned souls. So we're not in a position to really jump over to a previous acharya and understand what Srila Prabhupada could understand. We have enough books written by Srila Prabhupada to keep us busy for lifetimes. I think if we know more about what Srila Prabhupada wrote and said, we'd be in much better condition right now. And I really have objection to my god brothers who set such an example, because when new people come, they see that. Before they even start reading Srila Prabhupada's books, or when they start reading Srila Prabhupada's books, they start hearing people comment on previous acharyas which they've read. It's becoming a Sanskrit scholar or Bengali reader. That's not important.
I want to use just one example of a devotee that I personally really like a lot. And I'm going to mention his name. It's okay in this assembly. And that is Madhavananda Prabhu, who is a disciple of Gaur Govinda Swami, who was personally trained by Gaur Govinda Swami in various aspects of the Goswami literatures. And he read them under his guidance and tutelage. And I appreciate, when I talk to Madhavananda, his depth of knowledge and understanding, and he was trained personally by Gaur Govinda Swami.
All right, I have one comment to make about Gaur Govinda Swami, who's a god brother.
Yes.
So I heard him say that one cannot get Divya Gyan from a recording. He has to get Divya Gyan from a person. Now, when I heard that, I took that as a contradiction that actually anyone who listens to Srila Prabhupada's lectures with the speaker read his books can get Divya Gyan. They don't have to have a person in front of them to give up Divya Gyan. You don't have to go through anybody to get to Srila Prabhupada. You can get to Srila Prabhupada direct. These books are written for
I totally agree. And that's part of the problem of ISKCON. Devotees are not taught that.
That's right.
Yeah.
He said it. He said that one cannot get Divya Gyan from a recording. When I heard that, I thought, but we get everything from listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures. And I told you before, there's no difference between sitting in front of him in person and hearing him speak the recording. Absolutely.
And
so
personally, I appreciate it very much, that point. I do agree. And I don't know Gaur Govinda Swami that well. I don't know this specific incident, but I'm just talking about Madhavananda Prabhu's relationship with Gaur Govinda Swami and getting trained in studying the Goswami literatures.
Okay, well, my training is from Srila Prabhupada. Okay, I don't accept training from anybody else. I accept what he says is the most important thing.
Well, what about your personal name, Rupanuga? We're Rupanugas. We're supposed to follow Rupa Goswami.
Yes, I do. I read Nectar Devotion and Nectar Instruction. That's Rupa. Srila Prabhupada said Nectar Devotion. This is the final instruction to the neophytes from Rupa Goswami.
So all the other works of Rupa Goswami we're not meant to read?
No, but we have to read them first. And if we read them first, we'll be satisfied. Because we get Rupa Goswami in essence in those books. Rupa Goswami explains the Nectar of Instruction.
I agree, the essence is there, but what about the subtleties and nuances?
Listen, there's a difference between form and substance. We got enough substance from Srila Prabhupada. What's ISKCON suffering from now is form. There's so much overformed, so much organization, centralization, and so much bureaucracy that they missed the substance. Srila Prabhupada gave us all the substance we need to go back to Godhead, and all the substance we need to convince other persons of Krishna consciousness. And that's a fact. If we learn what Srila Prabhupada gave us, we'll be safe. And we should be teaching this to all the new people that come to understand that they should take Srila Prabhupada's books to heart, take them home. That's their best bet. You don't need anybody to explain Srila Prabhupada's purports. They're written for you. We tell them. This is a personal movement. It's intended for people to take it into their personal lives and associate with Srila Prabhupada directly.
No,
I
I
think that-
appreciate that very much, because I really, I understand what you're saying, and that message is not given by gurus, sannyasis, whatever spiritual leadership is there. It's very rare that I hear that message, that you have that personal connection with Prabhupada through his lectures, through his books.
Well, my only reason for existence, my only reason to be alive, to be 82 years old, is to be a transparent medium for Srila Prabhupada. I used to joke and say that if my body were buried on Boot Hill, there would be a monument put there. It wouldn't give a date, it wouldn't give a name, it would just say, "Here lies a chip off the old block."
Rupanuga Prabhu, Jivan Mukta Prabhu has had his hand up for a long time. I think he has a question or a comment he'd like to make to you. He's my old friend from the Toronto region here where I live. Jivan Mukta Prabhu, do you have something you'd like to share?
Hare Krishna, Rupanuga Prabhu, it's so wonderful to hear you and see you. I've heard so much about you. And I wanted to also just add on the point that you made about the tape, not being effective in transmitting transcendental knowledge. If that was the case, then all these devotees that got their Gayatri mantra by tape,
Right.
it would all be nullified. It would be of no value. Whereas Prabhupada made it a point where here's the tape, listen to the tape, and you're initiated by the tape.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make so that was one point I wanted to make. The other point was that ISKCON now has a division of where, the scholarly devotees, it's like a hermeneutics, division of ISKCON, which I found very interesting, because hermeneutics means how you interpret Shastra.
Right.
Yet we know that there's no interpretation. Prabhupada, went on and on and on how the Shastra, and Lord Chaitanya for that matter, with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, there's no interpretation. Why do we need an entire, body within ISKCON dedicated to the interpretation of Srila Prabhupada's books?
Can I make a comment now?
Sure.
I want to read to you a quote from an essay by Tamal Krishna while he was attending Southern Methodist University. And my opinion is all this academic association is contaminating.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, instead of converting the academicians, our people who have gone with their PhDs have been converted by the academicians.
Mhm.
And I'll give you some evidence right here. This is a quote from an essay about Hare Krishna. Quote, "But when the guru departs, sadhu and shastra can take on a new import, as those who succeed him become the new interpreters of past precedents, scriptural law, and the new set of circumstances." That's a carte blanche for
Right.
speculation. And
Absolutely.
that's what we're having. We're having that kind of thing instead of encouraging our scholarly devotees, encouraging devotees to study Srila Prabhupada's. But let me read this again. "But when the guru departs, sadhu and shastra can take on a new import, as those who succeed him become the new interpreters of past precedents, scriptural law, and the new set of circumstances."
Wow.
That to me is the core essence of what happens when you associate with speculators and
Yeah.
impersonals.
Yeah.
Bogus, totally bogus.
Yeah. I just wanted to also mention that, reading the first canto now and reading it really methodically and slowly and meditatively, like as a meditation, I realize how it's so true that everything is in the Bhagavatam purports, the first canto purports. Everything is there. I mean, we don't really even need the rest of the Bhagavatam. The first canto, everything is jam-packed in every sentence, every
That's because he
paragraph.
didn't know he was going to finish it. He
Yeah,
put so much. He wrote that in India.
Unbelievable, unbelievable.
So let me explain something to you. Srila Prabhupada says at one point, we thank Narada Muni for coming to us from the pages of the Bhagavatam. When we read that Bhagavatam, we're with the sages in the Risharama.
Mm-hmm,
We're there listening.
mm-hmm.
We're there when Parika is being lectured to by Sukadeva Goswami. We are present because it's beyond space and time. These books are beyond space and time. They are transcendental. And when we read them or listen to them or associate with it in a humble state of mind or submissive oral reception, as Srila Prabhupada called it, we're there. We have no business being there. We're not qualified to be there with the sages of Mishranya. But Srila Prabhupada was so kind that he took us there. And that's what you're experiencing. You're experiencing it's alive. And you come to life by being in that life. That's what happens with the Bhagavatam. It is so perfect. It is so pure. It's beyond space and time. It's not three-dimensional. It's in the fourth dimension. It's not in space and time as we know it. We have to see Srila Prabhupada from the cosmic point of view. That this Earth planet is the most important planet in the universe. Because this is where Krishna comes to show his real pastimes. And we have had this translated, all of his pastimes and everything Krishna said beyond Bhagavad Gita's, so many commentaries, his statements he made and recorded by Srila Prabhupada and explained by Srila Prabhupada. This is a unique event that cannot be replicated. The Srila Prabhupada brought the teachings of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu out of India to the rest of the world in 1965. It was 5,000 years it took for that to happen. Because all the other translations were useless. And they were hidden, locked up, just like we say, Nityananda plundered the storehouse of love of God and preached in Bengal. The Srila Prabhupada plundered the love of God storehouse again and brought it out of India to the rest of the world. And then, if that wasn't enough, he took it back to India again. He took the treasure back to India and rejuvenated Krishna consciousness. So our Srila Prabhupada is, there's no way that we can actually comprehend his exalted position. We can try to understand. Every day we pray, let me try to understand my spiritual master who is in blissful Krishna consciousness. Let me meditate upon him being enthused as he has enthused us. And that is our duty. We want to enthuse Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhu, could I ask you something? As you were speaking, I've been thinking that Srila Prabhupada, let's look at the situation currently where you have the gurus and you have Srila Prabhupada. You have those who are initiating in Srila Prabhupada. For us, when we worship Srila Prabhupada, knowing that Bhakti Siddhanta is also there, it was never, we were never really so inclined to want to delve into Bhakti Siddhanta's life, so to speak, or get into his books or into his mood. For us, Prabhupada was everything. But what I find now is that many of the newer disciples, and my situation's a little unique because I was initiated by Kirtananda, and when he officially was excommunicated, I was always, for me, Srila Prabhupada was always the focus, but that kind of settled it. Like for me, Prabhupada became my guru,
Right.
and I was not interested in getting reinitiated, despite what anyone may have said or continues to say. I don't care. I have Prabhupada's books. I was initiated enough. Once is enough. And so what I find is that, the current crop of disciples, they have their gurus and they worship their gurus as they see Prabhupada disciples, let's say, worship Srila Prabhupada. And in that sense, Prabhupada becomes, it's not something that they feel that kind of separation, a little separation, because he's the Param Guru. So they focus on their spiritual master. I feel that this is something very, very similar to what happened with Prabhupada disciples and Bhaktisiddhanta. So that's why I see that a lot of younger devotees aren't reading Srila Prabhupada's books, because they feel that separation. Do you know what I mean? Like they feel that it's a different generation. I have my guru now. I'm going to worship him. I'm going to read his books. I'm going to dedicate my life to him. And
I got you. But the absolute truth doesn't change. Srila Prabhupada gave it in its pure form. It doesn't change. Nobody can improve it. And it's always good for now as it was 5,000 years ago. The problem, what you're talking about is being, the cause of it is the lack of appreciation for Srila Prabhupada. It's not being taught by his disciples. It's not being taught by his disciples because Srila Prabhupada is not an ordinary acharya. He's the world acharya. His books are the law books for everybody. So that Srila Prabhupada's unique position is not being passed on properly by his disciples. And why? I'm going to say something you're not going to like.
Go for it.
Are you ready?
Ready.
I am ready for anything you've
You
got.
know why they changed the books? You know why they're changing the deity worship? You know why they're changing the standards? You know why they don't talk about Srila Prabhupada more? I'll tell you why. Because they don't love him enough. That's why. They don't love him enough. And if they loved him, they would be sure to be glorifying him above everybody. That everyone should look up to him as a pure unalloyed devotee. And all these persons who we don't know, listen, all the men that Srila Prabhupada appointed were all Madhyam Adhikaris, and he knew it. But Madhyam Adhikaris, according to Bhagavatam, I wrote it down somewhere, are expected to take disciples from the Kanishta and non-devotee class. So Srila Prabhupada appointed a number of Madhyam Adhikaris to carry on the disciplic succession. But Srila Prabhupada is different. He has no defects. He is to be worshipped by everyone as the founder of Acharya. There were other founder of Acharyas. Madhvacharya was a founder of Acharya, but it was all in India. It was all kept in India. But Srila Prabhupada is the Acharya for the whole world, not just for India. So his books are perfect, and his association is the highest. And these devotees who are his disciples should be saying that every time they speak, because they're nothing. The best they can do is be transparent mediums for Srila Prabhupada, and that's enough. That's it. The Parampara is a transparent medium all the way from Lord Brahma. And that's why we read Bhaktisiddhanta's Brahma Samhita. And that's why he didn't want a comma changed, because it's perfect.
So
Srila Prabhupada, let me finish. Srila Prabhupada is perfect. Not like Kirtananda. Kirtananda was not perfect, and you know that. That's why you chose your Param Guru over, because of what he did, what he said. And he's not the only one. All of them, all of the 11 who had their Vyasasans in a semicircle put into the back of the temple in Mayapur. all exact replicas of each other, and they all jumped on the seat. That was a mistake. The idea was not to imitate, but to emulate. And they chose to imitate. It didn't work. And it won't work. And where are they now? So the system, the Parampara system, the Srila Prabhupada left us, he left us intact. He appointed Madhyam Adhikaris because he knew what he was doing. This Parampara had to go on. And with his books and their preaching would have been perfect. But they weren't transparent mediums from Srila Prabhupada. That was the problem. And the emphasis is not on Srila Prabhupada's books and his recordings, is because of a lack of love for Srila Prabhupada, a lack of understanding who he is. He never went anywhere. He was never succeeded by anybody. He was never equaled by anyone, past, present, or future. The fact that we're his disciples or his followers is so, our fortune is unbelievable. 4,700 disciples out of 5 billion people? And what is their obligation? Their obligation is to give Srila Prabhupada unadulterated. So I'm saying this, and I'll go on record. There's a lack of love, or we wouldn't be acting like that, imitating him and changing his books.
But it could be said that maybe that's why they're doing, they want his books to be like perfect from a grammatical standpoint, from every perspective. So they're doing it in order to make them.
No, that's the propaganda. But they were already perfect. And Bhagavatam says that. You have to accept them as perfect. And besides that, nobody got any permission from Srila Prabhupada for such extensive editing. I was giving a class in Jacksonville 5 or 6 years ago, just one person, and we were reading. He had a new version and I had my old Chaitanya Charitamrita. I was shocked to find a series of verses we were reading that in every verse a change had been made in the English. And he said to me, well, I like your version better. But the point was, the changes were made were not so philosophically, but they were totally, absolutely unnecessary. Because the person didn't understand, they were tampering with Shastra. They didn't understand what they were doing. Because profit, adoration, distinction. There's no other explanation of why such a disciple, initiated disciple, doesn't understand the mind of the Acharya. What he's doing, what he's saying is perfect. It's so simple. The protocols, the methods that Srila Prabhupada gave us in that storefront are so simple. They haven't changed. We've added the deity worship and more books, but the philosophy, the way, the attitude, the obligation of a disciple to a spiritual master, the obligation of everybody to Srila Prabhupada. He's so far, so we can't even understand how exalted he is. When he does artis, Lord Brahma and Narada Muni come. When he installed the deities in London, they came.
Yes.
And he said they want to come back for the evening artis. So you have to put 2 Vyasasans up there on the altar. And someone, Palaka wrote me the other day, he has some
They're
other.
still there.
Yes,
Still
they're
there.
still there.
They're
Yes,
still there. I've actually been discussing with the head Pradyumna. You have to put a name tag on each one. Otherwise, people look at them, they have no idea what those 2 little seats.
Yes.
No
Good
idea.
idea. Or even maybe put deities there.
But there's another.
That's a little much, but at least a name tag.
Yes.
But there are other places someone sent me an email the other day with other places where Narada Muni appeared, specifically Narada Muni. So, I mean, who can demand that kind of company? And who can we imagine that would have that kind of company that would come to see Srila Prabhupada do arti and come back again every evening? Who is Srila Prabhupada? It's so great that Lord Brahma, the head of our sampradaya, the creator of this universe, will come to his arti. And Narada Muni, come on. This is transcendental. This is the fourth dimension. This is beyond space and time, this movement. We don't put an anchor on the material world to hold it down. It's so unique in the whole universe. So I think if we would each day as disciples and followers of Srila Prabhupada simply meditate a little bit on him, we'll realize our good fortune and think in terms of how to take best advantage of it. And also to get a feeling, I've got to share this. Sharing is a big deal. Don't use the word preach anymore. Just use the word share. Let us share what we've learned from Srila Prabhupada with other people, other conditioned souls. That's a big favorite word on the net. Share, share, share. Okay, share Srila Prabhupada. That's what we should be doing.
Rupanuga?
Here.
A quick question. I mean, you know Jayadvaita Swami. Have you ever tried to dialogue with him, your concerns about the editing?
He was just here.
Was he receptive to any kind of dialogue? Because I know Garuda Prabhu has also tried to dialogue, but he shuts down. He doesn't engage in dialogue.
Right. Jayadvaita was here in Alachua about a month ago. And his follower called me and said, Jayadvaita want to meet me. So we did. I didn't mention the books. I didn't mention the books. I don't want to have a discussion with him on it. Jayadvaita and I have a different kind of relationship. He looks up to me as his senior godbrother.
Yeah.
And when he was told, when I wrote an essay criticizing the introduction to the 83 version, the little note from the editors, I called it "Where Angels Fear to Tread."
Yes.
And he wrote a rebuttal to that and sent it to me and asked that I not show anyone. And I kept that. Okay. So our relationship is not an ordinary one. It comes from the storefront days. I told them, I said, you know, the first time I saw you, I came down to visit from Buffalo and I saw this young boy in blue denim bottom, bell bottom, blue denims and a white t-shirt. And I thought, here's a sailor on leave. And he had a big laugh about it. That's the first time I saw him when I was visiting the storefront from Buffalo in '68. So I don't get into a discussion with him because I know it's useless. It's useless. I don't want. There's no.
I mean,
what's done
useless. Exactly.
Was done is done, and so I just acted on the God Brotherly platform.
Right.
We talked about different things, and he was here a couple of years ago too, and I just bombarded him with Simply Wonderful. He ate them all.
But Prabhu, how could you say though that I don't get, of course I don't know him very closely or anything, but how can you say that he doesn't love Srila Prabhupada?
I didn't say he didn't love him.
So he doesn't love him as enough.
Enough.
He doesn't love him enough.
None of us do.
Well, okay, but we don't have to conclude that there was malevolence in his
I didn't
intent.
say malevolent. I didn't say anything malevolent.
Okay, so it's just that his good intentions were not shastrically proper, I guess. That's what you're saying, that despite his good intentions, it wasn't something he should have done.
Well, first of all, it wasn't his idea. It wasn't his idea. He was approached.
By
He was
whom?
actually Rabinder Sarup was approached before him. And Rabinder Sarup suggested, why don't you go to, because someone approached, I think it was Ramaswamy, approached about revising the Bhagavad Gita. And he said, why don't you go to someone else? He didn't want to do it. Jayadvaita, go to Jayadvaita. So then he went to Jayadvaita. So the idea was not Jayadvaita's. Jayadvaita was part of the staff of the idea came not from him.
Where did it come from?
I'm watching Rupanuga on this thing.
Where did the idea come from, Prabhu?
Rameshwar.
Isn't he speaking against the revisions now?
Who?
Rameshwar?
Rameshwar, do we have to get into, do you want to start talking to me about these things? You're going to have to listen to what I say. Rameshwar is an opportunist. He wants to get back into the fold, but he offended so many people. I have a friend here who said that he was in Mayapur when Vrindavan when Srila Prabhupada was passing away. And he was told by Rameshwar, you have to go home. In fact, they were preaching that don't anybody come. But Srila Prabhupada wanted all his disciples there. But they were preaching, stay, do your service. And this devotee said he didn't want to leave Vrindavan, but he had to leave because he was ordered to leave. So I'm not going to get into, Rameshwar cooperated with me a lot on my paper, the Change Disease and Windows to the Spiritual Sky. He cooperated with me. He provided me with documents. He provided me with a copy of the original contract between Srila Prabhupada and Macmillan Company. I signed that contract with Srila Prabhupada as a representative of ISKCON. And he sent me a copy. And in that copy, Srila Prabhupada had typed in specifically that he was going to take those paintings. No one else had charge of those paintings but himself. And he also said any revisions required his permission. That's written right in the contract. He made that change, or he wouldn't sign it. So what can I say? It's logical. It's the common sense. If the changes were needed, they should have been, first of all, approached Srila Prabhupada before he disappeared, because the same changes were there from 1972 until 1977. When all those years, any editor could have approached Srila Prabhupada with a suggestion for anything. That's what they were doing. That was their business. They approached him for permission on so many other things. But when you think about making corrections, that's on Srila Prabhupada's books or his dictations. That's very, very serious. But I'll give you an example. It's human. The error is human, right? Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture in 77 in Mayapur, in which he says, Krishna does not eat chocolate. Therefore, we do not eat chocolate. So, but he said chocolate, he said chocolate. So the person who transcribed it, that got on the internet, he translated chopped cutlets, and that's what went in to the transcription that went on whatever they post. But that's not what Srila Prabhupada said. He said nothing about chopped cutlets in Mayapur. He was talking about chocolate. So a mistake was made. Why? We don't have to, maybe that person liked chocolate. I don't know. But whatever happened was passed on as Srila Prabhupada said. But he didn't say that. So mistakes can be made. I agree. There's no question about good intentions, but the road to hell's paved with good intentions, as one say. So I'm not accusing anybody of anything. We have to judge by the result.
Okay,
There
so in
are-
that instance that example you gave, we've got the tape where Prabhupada says chocolate, even though it was,
I got the tape.
pronounced. Okay, so in that case, if it was in a book, should that not be changed?
Of course.
Right, so weren't a lot of the changes in that category?
But no, some of them were sort of like Planet of the Trees. Some of them were just really kind of transcription errors, but you have to draw a line. Because when I see where Srila Prabhupada's emphatic statements, when there's an extra word or two or repetition, because you know as well as I do, that Srila Prabhupada is a very emphatic preacher. And emphasis had a lot to do with meaning. So you change emphasis, you change meaning. It can be very subtle. It takes somebody a little familiar with Srila Prabhupada's intentions to even spot it. New people can't do it. But old people know that that's what happens when you do something with Shastra. And you're a conditioned soul.
Question, Prabhu? About outside instruction, many of our God brothers have availed themselves of the association of spiritual leaders of the Gaudiya Math, disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, God brothers of Srila Prabhupada, for example. Do you see that as a sign of lack of love for Prabhupada, or do you see it as a shift of loyalty? How do you explain that?
Again, we have to go by what Srila Prabhupada said. There are, and I have 100 letters from Srila Prabhupada. And in some of those, he talks specifically about his God brothers. There's a classic letter that I hear quoted from all the time that's usually misquoted. But he told me that his Guru Maharaj was disgusted. Otherwise, he would have stayed longer. And Srila Prabhupada informed the GBC to tell the devotees who were going to buy Gaudiya Math books at the Yoga Pit one year not to go there and buy the books. He said anything after 36 published by the Gaudiya Math should not be accepted. And he told his couple of devotees to go there and tell those devotees not to buy the books. One time, he had his whole set of Chaitanya Chaitamritas returned from a God brother who was criticizing him. I knew from the very first, when I heard Srila Prabhupada had God brothers, I was so enthused to think we had reinforcements. But you can imagine my disappointment when I found out that his God brothers were not supporting him. In fact, one of them had initiated someone he'd already initiated.
Ban Maharaj.
And he says another letter, and he's running after my other disciples in the novel. That was back in '66. I'm not going to get it. I wrote an essay about this, so I'm not going to get into it right now. But there's a letter he sent to all temples, and I have a copy of it, in which he says the devotees are not to associate with his God brothers. And he gave a number of reasons. And he said they can harm our movement. And when those sannyasis were preaching that Srila Prabhupada was God, he wrote me in a letter, I know this has come from my God brothers, but it's how they've done it is a mystery. Another place he wrote that they don't like me because I'm called Prabhupada. Because Gaudiya Math teaches that the last great acharya in the line was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And everybody else after that's equal. So they're all calling themselves Bhaktivedanta now. That wasn't there before Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. Now they're all calling themselves Bhaktivedanta, Bhaktivedanta this, Bhaktivedanta that, Bhaktivedanta that. Why? It's simply reducing the level of Srila Prabhupada. It's very subtle. And the reason I understand this is because I understand it from the beginning. And I didn't like seeing my Srila Prabhupada or Swamiji disturbed by these things. And as a GBC from 1970 on, I was aware of these things going on. And it's glossed over a lot since Srila Prabhupada disappeared. Srila Prabhupada said in 1974 in a lecture of Bhagavatam, I have it, a quote, I have personal experience of a great institution being lost by the whimsical behavior. That's 74. And he's talking about the Gaudiya Mat. So what do we have? Form over substance. Srila Prabhupada waited from 1936 to 1940, and every year there was a new acharya. And they were told in the first place not to have an acharya. They were told to have a GBC. So in 1940, Srila Prabhupada waited 4 years, and then he started his own organization. He called it,
League of Devotees.
no, this is before that. That was Jhansi. Before that,
Gaudiya Vedanta Samiti.
yes, that was 1940. He started that, but he waited for 4 years.
That was
Srila
with
Prabhupada-
Bhakti. Go ahead. Sorry.
Srila Prabhupada didn't try to reform the Gaudiya Mat. He spoke in 1936, the last Vyas Puja. Srila Prabhupada was asked to speak. And even in that time, he was admonishing his godbrothers to cooperate. I have a copy of that lecture. 1936, the last Vyas Puja, because Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur disappeared in 1936, the 31st of December.
Is that available anywhere to read?
Hello? Go ahead.
Now that you brought up, the Gaudiya Mat and Bhaktisiddhanta's passing away, my reading of Srila Prabhupada's explanation of that period was that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj Prabhupada said that he wanted the GBC to keep the mission going until the Acharya became self-effulgent and self-evident. That there was going to be an Acharya, but they should wait until he becomes self-effulgent.
No, you didn't say that.
He
didn't
did
say that. No, what happened was he said an Acharya will be self-effulgent. It was a general statement. It wasn't a specific statement that Acharya was coming.
I could find it.
You can find it.
I'll find it right now.
You find it because it's not that Srila Prabhupada was telling us to expect an Acharya to come and replace the GBC. We never had that conception. We never had that conception. From the last meeting we had with Srila Prabhupada, which is a whole other issue, we never had this idea that we were going to be in place until an Acharya came. No way. Because he told us my books are the law books for the next 9,500 years. So whoever comes has to go by those law books anyway.
No. This Bhaktisiddhanta said that. Prabhupada said that Bhaktisiddhanta said to wait, the Acharya will become self.
Well, of course, he was talking about Srila Prabhupada.
Well, that's my take on it.
Of course.
But my point is that Bhaktisiddhanta, Prabhupada at that time was a Grihasta, so certainly Bhaktisiddhanta couldn't appoint Prabhupada as the successor. But I've heard some representations of that statement of Bhaktisiddhanta's that there would be an Acharya of the Mat and there would still be multiple initiating gurus. But I always understood that the Acharya of the Mat would be the Acharya, like Prabhupada was the Acharya of the Mat.
There's a misconception. Any sannyasi is expected to accept disciples. That's what I mean. When Srila Prabhupada took sannyas, he made disciples shortly thereafter. And so the devotees, his godbrothers, went to Sridhar, who was the senior at the time, and said, Swamiji Bhaktivedanta, he's accepting disciples. What's the position? And so Sridhar Maharaj wrote Srila Prabhupada a letter that your godbrothers have come and asked me to ask you, what's your position about you've accepted a disciple? And Srila Prabhupada was telling this story to Pradyumna, who told it to me personally. And Srila Prabhupada said back, well, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. In other words, sannyas means disciple. Sannyasi is supposed to accept disciple. He doesn't need anybody, if he's a real sannyasi, he doesn't need anybody telling him when and where he can accept disciple.
But
Any disciple, any sannyasi is supposed to accept disciple.
But when you're like the Gaudiya Math was something unprecedented in it, like there was never an organized mission like that. So when you have an organized mission like that, is it still okay for all the sannyasis within that mission just to go out and take disciples with,
The parampara system includes sannyas in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Sannyasi is, according to Shastra, is a spiritual master for all the varnas and ashrams.
Right.
And he is authorized to accept disciples. That's what it means to be a sannyasi. So that's what Srila Prabhupada said. I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a sannyasi, to accept disciples. So he accepted a disciple. That was his answer. This idea that sannyasis have to be approved to take disciples is bogus. If he's a real sannyasi, he doesn't need approval.
In other words, just by his acceptance of the sannyas order, that is his qualification to be a spiritual master.
Assuming he's qualified. In
Right.
the first place. I mean, ISKCON has been offering a lineup of pre-authorized sannyasis for years. I mean, spiritual masters. They set up a whole system of pre-authorized gurus. That's what it was. The disciple didn't have to decide whether this person's really really a bona fide. He was told these people are certified. So you just have to pick one. But the system is that the disciple has to examine the spiritual master for 1 year at least.
Mhm.
And the spiritual master has to examine the prospective disciple for a year. Because the disciple has to decide, I'm going to surrender my life to this person. Can I do it? But when you present a lineup of pre-certified spiritual masters, that takes away the onus from the responsibility from the individual to make that decision. He is told that all you've got to do is be attracted to one of them. You don't have to investigate. You don't have to listen to them. You don't have to sit in front of them for a year. You see, this is what has been done. It's been done. It's a fact of history. I'm not criticizing. I'm just explaining the system that Srila Prabhupada left.
Mhm.
And that he expected to carry on. And that Shastra explains. A sannyasi means disciples.
In the
And a
context,
guru,
in the context of the Gaudiya Math that I was referring to, so what you're saying is that Bhaktisiddhanta wanted a GBC set up. Clearly, he wanted a GBC set up, and so Prabhupada's criticism that his disciples, one after the other, they all became acharya. Instead of waiting for the one acharya, they all became acharya, and the Gaudiya Math was dismantled at that point. So the vision of Bhaktisiddhanta, according to you, was to have one acharya that was the initiator for the
No,
Math,
I'm not-
or that there was going to be an acharya, a GBC, and sannyasis that initiated on their own.
we have to take what Srila Prabhupada said, that his Guru Maharaj said. He said his Guru Maharaj did not want an acharya to take over after him. That was clear. And they did it. He also said that he wanted, his Guru Maharaj said, to have a GBC. And they didn't. That's clear. But a sannyasi taking disciples is a different issue. It's an issue before the Gaudiya Math. It's before the Gaudiya Math is in the line of a parampara, just like ISKCON is in the line of parampara. before the Gaudiya Math existed. What did Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur do? He started 64 maths, large and small, for a single purpose. He wanted to train up disciples to go out and preach in the world. In those days, he was making, the Srila Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj made sannyasis, I made grahastas. So in those days, the people had extended families. They were so attached to the whole system, family life and all that, that Bhaktisiddhanta emphasized renunciation. But as Srila Prabhupada once said, he said, what is this renunciation? This is artificial. You have nothing to renounce. It all belongs to Krishna. So anyway, the point is that he made sannyasis because he wanted him to go and preach. Now, do you think that if these sannyasis had done what they not all over the world like he wanted, they were not to accept disciples like Srila Prabhupada did? How would things go on? You see, Srila Prabhupada did not say that that Bhaktisiddhanta didn't want anyone to initiate our sannyas. They were all sannyasis. Practically speaking, Srila Prabhupada was one of the few grahastas that were his disciples. So the history is that sannyasi take disciples. We don't know of any statement where Bhaktisiddhanta changed that, or Srila Prabhupada certainly didn't change that. He told, what was it, a devotee, a sannyasi who was in Hawaii preaching, and what was his name? He was from, I forget his name, Siddha Sarup. He told Siddha Sarup, you can accept your own disciples. Siddha Sarup said, no, I don't want to accept them. All of them belong to you. But he gave him permission. He also told another sannyasi, Tusha Krishna, Pasha Krishna, I forget which one, that you start your own movement, he said.
Push Krishna, yeah.
Yeah, you can start your own movement. Oh, he didn't want to take this. He's saying, just don't change anything.
Oh.
See, and that's what happened. All these Madhyamadakaris, gurus that Srila Prabhupada appointed, and there's an issue that he never appointed them. I tell you, that is completely nonsense. I was there. I was one of the 1918 GBC men who signed off on that meeting. But they've got this, created this whole thing out of anger, out of whatever. They created their own disciplic succession. This disciplic succession was not changed by Srila Prabhupada. So when he accepted that disciple, I thought that I was supposed to do. That was his answer. I took sannyas. I thought I was supposed to have disciples. Simple. In fact, there was a time, and I have a transcription of it, when Srila Prabhupada told one GBC who was present when he spoke, I don't want to make any more sannyasis. No more sannyasis. Too many falling down, even though they promised this, promised that. I was a paka grahasta. What's wrong with being a grahasta? And that was lost in the shuffle, but it was in the conversation books. And that GBC member who sat there never said anything to me about it. So it's questionable, in my mind, what Srila Prabhupada wanted about the sannyas shastra. Actually, he spread a movement with grahastas and brahmacharis before there were any sannyasis. Kirtananda was the first one. And that was exemplary for India. Anyway, these are all what I call controversies. And as Srila Prabhupada remarked, in a discussion, if a decision cannot be reached, further conversation is prajalpa.